Reuben Houston Burrow. I was born December 1855 and I died in October of 1890. I was a train robber and outlaw in the southern and southwestern United States. During the final years of the American frontier, I became one of the most infamous and hunted men in the Old West since Jesse James. From 1886 to 1890, me and my gang robbed express trains, regular trains, mail trains, all kinds of trains in Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana, and the Indian Territory and Texas, while being pursued by hundreds of lawmen throughout the southern half of the United States, including the Pinkerton National Detective Agency. I was born in Lamar County, Alabama, on December 11, 1855. I worked on the family farm in Alabama until the age of 18, when I moved to Stephenville, Texas, to work on my uncle's ranch. By all accounts, I fully intended to become a rancher. By saving up enough money to buy a farm, marry, and start a family. Attempted farming, but my wife, Virginia, died of yellow fever in 1881, leaving me to care for two small children. I remarried in 1884 and moved to Alexander, Texas, but when my crops failed, I turned to robbing trains with my brother Jim in 1886. My unexpected turn to crime occurred in December of 1886 when me and my brother Jim teamed with W.L. Brock, Leonard Brock, Henderson Brumley, and Ned Thornton to rob the Denver and Fort Worth Express while returning from a trip to the Indian Territory. Me and the other men waited at the train depot at Bellevue until the train arrived. Drawing our guns on the crew in full view of the passengers, we entered the train, but were only able to collect about $300. The Fort Worth Daily Gazette reported a loss of $100 and 10 to 15 watches. The reason being, the passengers were able to hide most of their valuables by the time the outlaws passed through one of the cars. A U.S. Army sergeant of 24th Infantry Regiment and two privates were escorting two deserters in shackles. The passengers were able to persuade the sergeant not to fire at the outlaws. However, he was later censored for cowardice by his superiors following the investigation. Meanwhile, I had already begun planning my next holdup, from Texas to Arkansas. 6 months after the first robbery, me and my gang boarded the Texas and Pacific Express, heading eastbound from Benbrook, Texas, June 9, 1887. Learning from our mistakes from the last holdup, I had the engineer held at gunpoint and forced him to stop the train on a trestle outside the town. This was meant to discourage passengers who would have to brave the heights and meager footing in order to interfere with the robbery. The loot was about $1,300 from the mail car. 3 registered letters were taken, although how much I escaped with is not known. It was apparently enough for me to rob a second train at the same spot in September of 1887. On the second occasion, news reports estimated me and my gang escaped anywhere from $1,200 to $12,000 and $30,000 in bonds. On December 9th, me and Jim Brock stopped a St. Louis, Arkansas and Texas Railroad Express train at Genoa, Arkansas. Despite the train being guarded by the Southern Express Company, we escaped with a Louisiana lottery payoff estimated to be between $10,000 and $40,000. Because the Southern Express Company was a client of the Pinkerton Detective Agency, the robbery came to the attention of the Pinkerton detectives, lawmen, and bounty hunters alike. Within 5 days, the Pinkerton men came up with their first major lead. A deputy sheriff had reported that he had encountered 3 suspicious-looking men on the day of the robbery. All 3 escaped, however. One of the men left behind a raincoat, which was eventually traced to a store in Dublin, Texas. The sales clerk identified the man who bought the coat as Jim Brock. Once in custody, Brock quickly confessed to participating in the robbery and named me as the ringleader. I was unknown to authorities, having no criminal record, and Brock insisted he did not know the whereabouts of his accomplice. The Pinkertons would get their second break when Brock received a letter from me I was not yet aware of Brock's arrest, and detectives seized the opportunity to capture him. According to the return address, the letter was sent from Lamar County, Alabama, and a posse was immediately sent to my house. Upon their arrival on January 8, 1888, they surrounded my home, but found that I had fled after being warned by my brother Jim about their approach. 2 weeks after making our escape, me and Jim were spotted by a conductor while riding on a Louisville-Nashville train in southern Alabama. Police surrounded the train when it arrived in Montgomery and captured Jim after a brief gunfight. I was able to shoot my way out and escape from the ambush alone. It was reported a printer boy named Neb Boyd was attempting to pursue me, received a bullet hole in his chest during my escape. I was involved in a second gunfight with a posse but escaped despite receiving birdshot wounds in the neck. Jim was taken into custody and sent to jail in Texarkana, where he would die from tuberculosis on October 5, 1888. On December 15, 1888, me and S.C. Brock, aka Joe Jackson, robbed an Illinois Central Express train at Duck Hill, Mississippi. When the conductor reported the robbery in progress, two passengers, Chester Hughes with a Winchester rifle and John Wilkinson with a revolver, rushed to the express car where I was. In my after-death confession, I claimed to have killed Hughes, who in falling knocked the pistol out of Wilkinson's hand. Although I was usually a cautious and detailed planner, I began to develop a reckless attitude, which was further encouraged by my recent series of near escapes. Shortly after the gunfight at Montgomery, I shot and killed Lamar County Postmaster Moses Graves in July of 1889 during a heated argument when Graves demanded that I sign for a delivery of a package. The uncharacteristically cold-blooded murder of the postmaster turned the local residents against me and forced me to flee the county. The package had contained a false beard I had ordered to disguise myself. I continued to rob trains despite being a wanted fugitive. In September of that year, I robbed the Mobile and Ohio Express train near Buckalana, Mississippi, and then the Northwestern Railroad train in Louisiana 2 months later. I was pursued by Pinkerton detectives following the robbery for 2 days across the Raccoon Mountains in Blount County, Alabama. The posse was forced to turn back after two trackers, one of them William Penn Woodward, the other Harry Anderton, had been killed and 3 others seriously wounded. Becoming the sole subject of one of the most widespread manhunts in American history, I would continue to elude authorities in the wilderness of Alabama Hill Country for another 2 years. On October 9, 1890, I was captured by Jesse Hildreth and Frank Marshall with the help of 2 planters, John McDuff and Dixie Carter, at John Ford's cabin in Myrtlewood, Marengo County, Alabama, on December 7, 1890. McDuffie had suspected I would be in the area and warned Hildreth to be on the lookout. When I showed up at Ford's cabin, Hildreth was inside and was able to get word back to McDuffie. Hildreth and Marshall jumped me and held me from McDuffie and Carter. They took me to the jail in Linden, Alabama, with myself entertaining them all the way with funny stories. I offered Hildreth $100 if he would let me go. I couldn't use it then because you'd kill me first. That was his response. In the early morning of December 8, 1890, I complained of hunger and talked his jailers into handing me my bag, which had some ginger snaps inside. It also contained a gun, and I held it at the head of one of the guards. I escaped, locking 2 guards, including McDuffie, in my cell, and taking another guard with me to find Carter at Glass's store to get money that had been taken from me. I reportedly believe Dixie Carter was Nick Carter, the fictional detective. Carter was in the store, and when I came outside, he and I exchanged gunfire. Afterwards, I was dead in the street, and Carter was wounded. My body was shipped by train back to Lamar County. It was reported that on a stop in Birmingham, thousands viewed my corpse, and people snatched buttons from my coat, cut hair off my head, and even my boots were stolen. My father, Reuben Burrow, met the train and sold it. It was reported that the train attendants threw the coffin at his feet. "It's Rube," he reportedly said. Reuben Burrow carried his son's body back to his home community near Vernon and buried him in Fellowship Cemetery. In December of 1890, Accomplice Jackson committed suicide in the Jackson Penitentiary by jumping from its gallery. Accomplice Ruth Smith was sentenced to 10 years in the Mississippi Penitentiary for the 1889 Buckatown robbery, but was then tried again in federal court for mail robbery, found guilty, and sentenced to life imprisonment in the Ohio Penitentiary in January 1891 as inmate number 21, and died April 20th, 1895. So thank you for listening to my story and my testament and my adventures.